Hey guys, it's Jenna. Welcome back to my channel today. Today's video is going to be about the new Natasha Denona mini palette. This is the Mini Crush eyeshadow palette and eyeshadow brush gift duo from Natasha Denona. And this is actually the exact same price as a traditional mini. For instance, the Mini Love palette, both are $25 US or 33 Canadian dollars. It's just that this little duo comes with a brush as kind of like an add-on. So let's get right on into it. I have a couple thoughts. Of course, it's on my eyes today, and I'm wearing some new Invisalign trays. So if you hear any slight lisping and stuff, I apologize. It's a new tray and you know how it is. So right off the bat, let's talk about what this all includes. This is a 5-pan mini from Natasha Denona. Now, this is one that actually has a variety of her formulations, but it's not typical of other minis she's done. She sort of likes to jump around between which formulations she wants to include in these. Going from left to right, we have Daisy, which is actually her formulation, kind of like a sparkly cream powder formulation. This is a sparkling bubblegum pink, and it's kind of like a top coat. We're going to talk about this shade in particular because it's stunning. Next, we have Lotus, which is a creamy matte. Koi is a creamy matte, Soul is a creamy matte, and then Claret, which is a metallic. It's very interesting because this palette gave me some interesting vibes all around. A little bit of retro, a little bit of mini love. So I was kind of wondering how these compare. So we are going to be comparing them to the other two palettes I mentioned at the end of the video. The thing that I wish right off the hop, she didn't include a cream to powder formulation in here. And when you think about the counterpart here, so this is interesting. The Mini Love palette doesn't have it either, but other minis she has done, like the Mini Biba, which was just recent before this one, this had a cream to powder as well. So she does seem to mix it up a little bit. So this is one that doesn't have it, and the cream to powder is kind of like one of my favorite Natasha formulas. So I was a little bit disappointed to not see it in here, but the creamy matte is still okay. I actually think it's still a strong formula, but this is like the dominant formula in here. Out of 5 shades, 3 of them are the creamy matte. You guys might tell I have a little bit of a glow to me. I actually did go on a bit of a vacation. I was able to get away for a bit, so I do have a little bit of a glow going on. When I swatched these, it was interesting, almost like they didn't really perform as well as I remember her creamy matte to perform. And I wonder if it's just because I have a tan now and my skin is drier. I don't know, but I kind of struggled with it looking like richly pigmented like how they normally look. I found myself layering these shades, especially the creamy mattes, multiple times, probably 4 times at least, but you'll see the swatches at the end as well, so stay tuned for that. Now, let's talk about the application of this, and we're going to talk about the pros and the cons as well, whether or not I think it's worth purchasing or not. So at the very beginning, I actually went all over the lid with the first creamy matte. This is a Lotus. Lotus is described as a matte pinky nude, and that's absolutely what it is. It does translate really well, and I do think that this is one that does have that characteristic creamy matte, although a little bit dry, just a touch. I don't know if it's just because, like I said, maybe I've got a little bit of glow and some dryness happening. Typically when you have a tan, it does tend to kind of suck your skin dry a little bit. Consistent with her creamy matte formula, probably overall, with just like a touch of something a little different, a touch of some dryness, but nothing crazy. Not something I would dismiss the palette over. Next, I went in with the shade Soul. This is a matte, medium rosy coral, and I actually used the synthetic brush that this palette comes with for this one. You can see that it's a really nice brush, but it does have a couple of cons to it. One being that it is a little bit more short when it comes to the stem. The stem is something that is, I wish was a little bit longer, but I understand that she kind of wanted to put this together. Didn't want the stem to be past like the length of the palette, right? So I see that's what she was trying to do. But when it comes to working with a pigment like this, they're so richly pigmented that if you're not careful, you can put a lot of it on the eye, and then you need to have that blending capability. This brush does do that, but I find that I was really working with the edge of this. I felt like I didn't have my hands perfectly like comfortable on it because it was so short. So I was just kind of doing this with the very tip of the stem, and although it blended okay, I wish I had a little bit more distance there. Plus, this one has kind of like a narrowing to it. It's not as rounded as other diffusing brushes you can use. So it's definitely nice to add some layering, to add some pigment over top. But when it comes to blending the edges, I would choose something a little more rounded. like the Wayne Goss 16. It's rounded all the way around just to have that nice diffused edge, because we are talking about deeper pigments in this palette that can very easily translate to lines and stuff. So when it comes to this one, it layered okay, but I will say that the lightest shade, in my opinion, was the easiest to use with the mattes. This second pigment gave me a little bit of patchiness, nothing crazy, but just a touch as well. Next, I went on the bottom lid there, actually with the metallic. This is called Claret, and this is described as a metallic scarlet red. This is something, I mean, you can see that my look overall today is very bold. It's quite dark overall. This is not something I would typically go for. We're going to talk about that in the pros and cons later. But I do think that this is a shade that can have the potential to make you look sick. It just depends on the undertone of your skin. So for myself, I think I pull it off okay, probably because with the rest of the shades, it looks a little bit okay. Like it pulls off perfectly fine, but a red you gotta be a little careful with. Could be that I just put it under the bottom lid and that's gonna make me look sick regardless. Maybe I should have placed it elsewhere, but this is one that does have a tendency, because it is such a rich red, it could make your eyes look sickly. Just be careful where you place this one, but the strength of this one is that it has a really nice pigment impact, really easy to apply, and I love the shimmer with this one as well. So this one swatches like a dream too, not that that matters as much as performance, but you can tell this is a very consistent shade, a very consistent metallic from her. No fallout as well as of yet, which is also great, and Natasha's not known for that much fallout. She does a pretty good job of putting her formulations together, but the creamy mattes can sometimes get some fallout. For sure the metallics can at times too, but I didn't notice anything with this so far. Next, we're going to go in with the shade Koi to add some depth. This is described as a matte, medium dark burgundy. 100% that's true. I do think it adds some depth, but I do think you have to layer it quite a bit to see that depth. And this is also something that I've noticed is kind of consistent in her minis lately. I noticed the same thing with the mini Biba palette. This is the darkest matte in this palette, and just like the darkest matte in Biba, I do feel like it's a little bit on the drier side as of late. I feel like if you made this the star of your look and put that purple all over, it's going to have a teeny bit of a patchiness to it that I wish didn't happen. So perfect shade to add some depth in the edging there, like on the edge of your look, maybe into the bottom lid, but I don't think it's a strong enough shade by itself if you wanted to put that entire shade over your lid. So this is also something consistent with the other mini Biba palette that I reviewed not that long ago, which was a launch just before this one. So it could be something to do with like the darker pigments pull a little bit drier when translated. I'm not sure, but for the sake of adding some depth, perfectly fine. So keep it to minimal use when it comes to adding some flare, adding some depth and some dimension, totally fine, because we're literally kind of situated to adding some layers right at the edging. But if you are doing something with an entire look, be prepared to be patient with it, and I would say layer quite a bit and really work at blending, because it could end up very easily patchy. This is the last shade in this palette, and in my opinion, it carries the palette. So let's talk about this last one. This is the Sparkly Cream Powder formulation. This is Daisy. Daisy's at the very top, and it is a bubblegum sparkling pink. Very, very gorgeous. Has a little bit of pigment underneath it in the form of a purpley pink kind of undertone color. It has a lot of shimmer, which I love. And this literally elevated my look to something that I would wear out versus something that I would not wear out. You have such a factor here if you do not use this shimmer. I'll be honest, all of the shades by themselves morph into each other a little bit too much. So we're going to get into the very first con of this palette. First con of this palette is there is not a ton of diversity between shades, in my opinion, where you have to be very, very careful which shades you place where, because especially these three, this can very easily look like one shade layered over top of each other and a very like lack of dimension look, if that makes sense. So for instance, there's a little bit of a bigger jump with the Mini Love. You can see that there's lovely tones in here. Some of her other minis are really, really great for having a little bit more versatility. This doesn't necessarily mean this is a crap product overall, but it's something that offers a little bit less. So if you didn't put the shimmer, you can see before I apply the shimmer how this looks like almost one color across my eye. And you can tell that I've used 4 here. So it's very interesting that this shimmer 100% carries this. Like, in my opinion, it still blends it in, like, I'll be honest. but it's adding a texture there that makes it look more visibly stunning on the eye. So the fact that she included this shade was literally a make or break shade, in my opinion. The fact that this was in here makes me want to use this palette again because there's actually something there to make it visibly interesting to look at. This review would have been a lot more poor overall without this shimmer shade. So this to me, key. Very, very key. I'm glad she put it in. I feel like it rescued this palette. Very much so. So we talked about one con, let's talk about a strength. The strength of this one is, those of us that want a very vibrant, pinky, purple, bold look, you're going to enjoy this a lot. So this is something to me, this is a little bit bolder than I would normally wear, but this is something that overall translates to a very gorgeous, romantic, bold look. That is definitely a pro. The other pro of this, the metallic in here is consistent and the shimmer shade is consistent. There's a little bit of inconsistency within the mattes though. And remember that the mattes are the dominant formulation in this one. So this is the best performing matte in here. The next one is this one, Soul, and the next one is Koi. Koi is the deepest in pigment and the poorest overall, but it's still not a terrible shade. I really want to stress that. It's just that it can't be the focal point of your look. It's going to make that patchiness incredibly visible. We did talk about the lack of versatility as a con, and I kind of leaned into the second con, which is the lack of consistency amongst the mattes in here. So really, really too bad to see that. And I also, I mean, this is a personal preference con. I really wish that there was a cream to powder in here. So, you know, that's just me being like really picky. I think she executed the brush okay. I mean, I get what she was trying to do to keep it the same size as the palette. I do wish it was a little bit longer though, but I do like the head of this brush. I do think it's a nice synthetic brush for the head of this particular tool. Now I'm going to show you guys the swatches and you can kind of see what I mean. So this is the swatch on my arm. You can see my arm's a little bit more golden than normal. But I do have the 3 mattes in the center and they have been layered multiple times. I want to preface that for you guys especially because these are not going to look like that after one swipe. The lightest one was easiest to swatch and the deepest one was the hardest to build up. So if that gives you some kind of context there, that's kind of what these swatches and how I created them kind of felt like. Next, we have the comparisons. I did want to compare it in particular to Mini Love. I know I'm going to get a lot of questions about this because these are very similar when it comes to like bold romantic colors. Not the same shade-wise, I'm going to preface that, but they do offer bold romantic looks. First off, you can see them side by side, and looking at them side by side, there's not a ton of similarities here, but I figured I would swatch the lightest purple in each of them as well as the deepest purple in each of them. How the mattes in Mini Love swatched compared to how the mattes in the Mini Crush, which is this palette that we're talking about, I feel like the Mini Crush was a little bit drier, so perhaps it's not just my skin, right? But this is just to illustrate that these are not the same shade. You can see some significant differences between them. Now let's talk about Mini Retro, because Mini Retro offers some interesting tones too that in my opinion are close to the Mini Crush palette. So looking at them side by side, we do have a couple that look close, like maybe Amara from Retro, Soul from the Mini Crush palette, so I did swatch those. Otherwise, the rest of them look different enough to me that I didn't feel like they were even close to being duplicates. So for those of you guys that are thinking about getting this palette, maybe you own Mini Love as well as Retro, and you were kind of concerned if there's any duplicates. Certainly not any duplicates, but there's definitely some similar inspiration from some of these palettes before this one, right? Would I recommend this overall? Let's just say this. If you're a hardcore Natasha Denona fan, you're going to enjoy it regardless because you love her and her formulations. But if this is something that you're kind of like, I have the other two, or I have other palettes, plenty of them. Is this a must need? No, I don't think this is a must have. And I do think there's going to be palettes this year that are going to be must haves. So this could be one that you could afford to skip, especially if you don't want a bold look like this. If you are someone that's an everyday, like nudes and light browns, light pinks, light purples, like more on the lighter, more muted side, this is certainly not going to be for you because this is quite bold. Although I love the bubblegum pink shade at the top here, this isn't enough to buy it, right? I'm not going to buy this whole palette for one shade. So You know, like this basically saves the palette for me, but this isn't going to be like, this is the shade that makes the palette, and even if the rest of them sucked, you could still get this one because that shade is that good. I mean, she makes amazing formulas. You don't necessarily need to have Mini Crush just for that one shade. It's $25 US, not a must need in my personal opinion. Did I enjoy creating this look? Yes. Did I think that it is bolder than I would normally wear? Yes. And I also think that this is one that gave me a little bit of harder trouble to work with the mattes being a little inconsistent. There was also a little bit of some hints with a new palette coming from Natasha. I don't want to share anything because I'm scared I'm gonna get in trouble, but if you guys saw the pastel palette coming, let me know down below. This is definitely something I'm gonna be reviewing when it comes out, and it reminds me a lot of Circle Loco, but kind of like a lighter version. So we'll see how it compares. Quick little hello from this guy. He says hi, and of course he just wants his toy right now, so he will not drop it. Hope you guys found this review helpful. Don't forget to subscribe if you are interested in more Natasha Denona reviews. I basically buy everything that she owns and I review it for you because she is a luxury brand and we gotta make sure it's worth buying. Until my next one, take care and stay safe. Bye guys!